Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. This is episode 419, and they're already started on me, beloved listeners and viewers. I just love this round table. It wakes me up at the end of the day. It puts me on my toes. It gets my juices going, whatever you want to say. So we've got a great round table. We're going to start off with my normal co-host, Adrian. Adrian, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Hi, everyone. My name is Adrian. For those who don't know me, I am the CEO and founder of Groundhog. We produce marketing automation and sales tools for companies that use WordPress in order to contact with their subscribers and their customers.
Right, and I've got Uncle Spencer. Would you like to introduce yourself to listeners and viewers?
Spencer Foreman from WP Launchify.
There you go. And I've got Sally. Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Certainly. My name is Sally Getch. My business is WP Fangirl. I am the disorganized organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California, and the human behind ADD Kitty.
The star of the show, I might say. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Chris from Lifter LMS, which is a WordPress plugin for creating, selling, and protecting engaging online courses. I also have a podcast for course creators called LMS Cast.
And we've got Walter the Terrible. Would you like to introduce yourself? No?
Yes, I'm Morton. I have a lot of opinions today.
Yeah, cool. That's good.
All right, so, today.
All right, there we go. Before we go into the main stories of the week, I like to talk about our great sponsor, and that's Kinsta Hosting. What is Kinsta Hosting? Well, they provide hosting only for WordPress, and it's quality hosting. So if you've got a membership site, learning management system, or WooCommerce for yourself or for a client, Kinsta is probably the best place to go to. I can't sing their praises higher because we have the WP-Tonic website on Kinsta, and they've looked after us for over 2 years, and they're just fantastic people, and they provide all the bells and whistles that you're looking for. Staging site, one-click backup, latest versions of PHP, and the two other main things you get is that they build their platform on Google Cloud, so you have the best technology on the market at the present moment, and also they provide 24/7 support, and it is some of the best support in the market at the present moment. Their support staff know what they're talking about, which if you've been with GoDaddy, which I have for the past, spent about 3 hours this week with GoDaddy, you appreciate that really, don't you? So if that sounds good, go to kinsta.com and tell them that you heard of them on the WP-Tonic show. So off with the first story. Auto update old versions to 4.7. Walton, like to fill us in on this story? You're mute. Are you mute?
I know. I keep losing my window. Hold on. I'll just bring up the post so I can read the stuff verbatim off. So on Wednesday, August the 7th, Ian Dunn, core committer, posted a proposal to auto-update old versions of WordPress to 4.7. The idea is that the policy of WordPress auto-updates should change to be the following: support the latest 6 versions of WordPress releases and auto-update unsupported sites to the oldest supported version. So that would mean the currently supported version would be 4.7 to 5.2, and the 3.7 to 4.6 branches would be auto-updated incrementally until they hit 4.7. So the idea is if you have a really old site that's running like 3.7 or something like that, WordPress core would start incrementally updating you for 3.7 to 3.8 to 3.9 to, right, and all the way up to 4.7 without you doing anything. So it'll just happen in the background on its own. And the way that they would roll this out is they would roll it out over a month-long period. So they would say, from this is decided, they would start posting an alert in the admin panel for people who have sites that are older, saying, hey, your site is going to be auto-updated to this version unless you actively opt out of this. And there would also be an email sent through the site from the site to the site admin saying the same thing.
Well, that's going to cause a few heart attacks, isn't it?
Yeah, so the post has...
yeah, it's going to cause a lot more than heart attacks.
Yeah, so the post has... and there's a very detailed plan. Like there's an implementation plan that has, 7 steps. Many of the steps have like 2, 3, or 4, or 5 sub-steps to them. And it's extremely detailed and thought out what this is supposed to look like. However, the comment section in this this post, which sits on make.wordpress.org, shows that this is an extremely complex topic. And yes, there is a very detailed plan, but there are a lot of assumptions behind that plan that are being challenged. So the key arguments against this that people have brought up are a lot of like site updates from version to version are not non-trivial. No, sorry, they are non-trivial. They are highly problematic and can cause all sorts of breaking changes and random things. Number 2, a lot of people who have sites don't necessarily log in to the admin panel very often, so they won't be notified. And a lot of those people don't get the emails from admin because they've turned it off. So that means they will not know that this is happening. Number 3, and this is something that was brought up by Mika, is a lot of changes that may happen to your site if you update from version to version are not grand changes that crash your site. There'll be little things like your buy product button suddenly doesn't work. And it'll take time for people to realize this is happening.
Oh, so, yeah, but Morton, for God's sake, Morton, if they're running an e-commerce bloody website or something and they can't be bothered to keep it updated, it's a bit of a sorry state, isn't it?
Well, some of these
that's not WordPress's
abandoned, but I don't think that's the point.
Yeah, WordPress can't make if WordPress has
WordPress lot. You just
okay. I'm leaving.
Are you gonna, it's like, why are we doing this? I mean,
well, the argument is security.
Seriously,
the argument is security. That older versions of WordPress have security issues, and quite frankly, the WordPress core team does not want to release security patches for old software. Okay. So this is the LTS discussion, right? It's like you have to at some point draw a line and say we're not going to support things older than whatever. The problem here is actually not that part. The problem is that they are saying they're going to force update people to new versions. And it's funny because if you asked that question to me 4 years ago, I would have said this is the right thing to do. Because 4 years ago, it was the right thing to do. Because 4 years ago, WordPress wasn't as mission critical as it is, and the version updates weren't as significant as they are. Now we have Gutenberg, so this is all of a sudden a thing that we cannot do. Because this will eventually result in Gutenberg being force updated onto people, and that will just take sites down, and it'll introduce known accessibility issues in sites.
Not really, because you can install on all the sites we support that don't want to go down the Gutenberg route, which is the majority of them so far. We install plugins that stop those updates, and we monitor it. So
yeah, but you're speaking from a privileged position of knowing how this shit works. The majority of WordPress users.
Well, sometimes one.
The majority WordPress user does not. They will not know about this until it happens, and they will not understand what's going on. And this is like, if you build an entire community around this idea of complete autonomy for the user, and then suddenly change that policy.
But when did Gutenberg come out? It didn't come out at 4.7.
No, it came out at 5.0. But the thing is, I mean, I have had to deal with people's sites where, in order to restore what was, the site had been lost. In order to restore from their old database, I had to install an old version of WordPress, and then we couldn't just upgrade because of issues with plugins, and it can be a really huge, stuff can break. And the thing about WordPress is that, it can't, and really doesn't want to control what else you have installed on your site.
I do follow you, Sally. Is it more, you got the core thing, haven't you, Morton, that you're not too keen on, but is it also the way it also just appeared, this document, whatever, how it kind
Well,
of.
they must have worked on it for a while, but I think the point about, we don't have an adequate means to notify people is a pretty important point.
Right. I'm going to throw it over to Uncle Spencer. Well, look, Spencer, the thing, I'm into camps here. I can see where Morton and Sally are coming from, but there's another part of me that thinks, I think it's WordPress is trying to be supporting all this old stuff much too long anyway. I think, there needs to be a cutting of, of sites at some versions. What do you reckon, Spencer?
At the risk of sounding like get off my lawn, you kids, I'm going to say WordPress cannot have it both ways. They cannot have an open source software that everybody has used with the freedom, as in free beer, to do what I want with it. And then later down the road say, well, we're not supporting you anyway on version 2.7, but we're going to go into your house, open your computer up, so to speak, and force something into your business that's going to break the shit out of everything you've created during your freedom period. And at the same time, why do they give a shit? Because the security thing has no effect on Automatic. It has no effect on their upgrading the latest versions. This is my business based on open source software that I'm using for me and my clients at my peril. And I don't want you to come in and change it. For the same reason, back when I was in the old days practicing law, the first computers came into my dad's office and I helped out on a summer to reorganize his secretary's, green screen computer files for her. The next day when she showed up and all that stuff that was, like all over her desktop was organized, she immediately quit after working for him for 35 years because she couldn't find anything. WordPress comes in, forces an update that jams Gutenberg or otherwise down. The consequences are astronomical. The only final thing I want to say is, who is Ian Dunn? Why is it that Ian Dunn gets to come in and be the fault? Where is Otto?
Stop. Can I just intervene here?
Yeah.
So Ian Dunn is a core committer. This is how WordPress communicates. A core committer takes ownership of a proposal and puts it out. So this isn't Ian Dunn making a decision.
I
this
know
is
it's not. I'm saying
on behalf of.
I'm saying
this is
where's
the we
Otto?
problem. This is the we problem, right? Because Ian is like, I am the face of this. Who made the decision? We did. Who was we? I don't know. We did this in a room somewhere.
Where's Otto when you need him to take responsibility?
We need Otto, so we
He's
can
in the
blame
comments.
him.
He's in the comments.
He's going to go good.
And Mika is in the comments.
We miss you, Otto. We miss you, Otto.
I just want to say as a final parting
I'm going to have to get him on the show.
This kind of logic actually warms my cockles because it's getting me closer to winning my bet for 2020, which was that at some point, Automatic will be douchebaggery enough to force some group of people to fork and finally go ahead with something off the main core. And this is just the kind of logic that will make me win my bet in this group.
All right,
I'm really surprised Spencer didn't bring up the obvious problem of this will cause legal action.
Well, I mean, it's like that's the happy ending of all this.
I mean, this story, and just to show you that, like, how I keep saying that WordPress needs to get involved in politics and stuff.
Right.
So Politico, the news site for, political people, published their recently in whatever, these are the things that are happening that you need to know about. And let's see, how do they phrase it? Under their Quick Bites section, they posted, WordPress wants to force update old websites, and it links to a ZDNet article that's titled, WordPress team working on daring plan to forcibly update old websites.
That's what I put it.
This story is not just in the WordPress sphere anymore. This story is like out there in the face of people who normally never think about WordPress.
No, it's not bad. Go on, Adrian.
I have a couple thoughts, just arguments for. I'm not going to take a side either way, but as a plugin developer of a pretty big software myself, and I'm sure as Chris can also field me on this, is that like Morton, you had said, updating keeping updates of old patches is really a pain in the ass and takes a lot away from the development team to be able to commit to core improvements of the vast majority of WordPress users who are using the latest updated versions. I think, or at least the proposal reads very, very well, and I think it's good. Some of the reasons for why this may be an action plan sooner rather than later, and why this is coming out, is two reasons. I tell a lot of my own users for my plugin this, is that when we change features to become a more managed solution rather than providing our users autonomy, it's often to save them from themselves. For a variety of reasons. They could expose, my plugin manages a lot of contact information, which is private. And if they, somehow that gets out to people, or they change their compliance in a way that opens up to legal action, we do a lot of things of which some of them are unhappy about, but in order to save them from themselves. And if people are using really, really old versions of WordPress and people are, collecting lots of customer information, and then their site gets hacked, and then that information becomes exposed and it's technically WordPress's fault because of a security patch, then that, they place the blame on WordPress for not updating that old version. So I think part of this is to save us from ourselves if we want to use those old versions. If they're really committed to using those old versions, there's Classic Press now that has all of those involved, so they can switch to Classic Press, which was the fork when 5.0 came out. People didn't like Gutenberg, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the reasons. Number two is to maintain the reputation of WordPress. WordPress has a bad rep in many communities, online developer communities around the world, primarily because of the things that made WordPress insecure 10 years ago in 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, etc. So by migrating those people up, they can start to improve the overall reputation of WordPress around the world by ensuring that everybody has the latest update of the code. So I think those are a couple of the reasons of why this might be a good solution. Maybe it needs a little bit of work, but I think in order to save us from ourselves and providing that good user experience overall is a big plus for me.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Chris?
I just have a couple of notes. I need to sit with this idea for a while to really form a strong opinion. But one is, I like the fact that my web browsers just kind of update and get better and better over time. I do like that. I also want to highlight a story that we featured several weeks ago where Nathan Tyler's plugin called Plugin Detective was acquired by Pantheon. What Plugin Detective does is it basically automates the update process, and then it runs all these tests both visually and programmatically to see if anything breaks or changes in appearance. So if that were happening, like if this story came out, and by the way, it's going to be bulletproof, if something breaks, it's going to roll it back and notify you, that's a different story. The other thing is, I do like, with a big change like this, I think an opt-in as opposed to opt-out would be a more conservative approach. And then also, this is going to force, if this happens, the managed WordPress hosts and the people building care plans to innovate a little more, because that's one of the value propositions is we'll keep your WordPress up to date. We'll hold back if it's like a major thing, like what happened with Gutenberg and stuff like that. But that's one of the things that these core plans do. There's also a leadership precedent being set here. If WordPress does this, then what about all the other free plugins? So this is a big move, and it's a very much a leadership decision that's going to have cascading effects. That needs to be really thought through, multiple like chess moves out to make sure that when others follow in the footsteps, that it's a good play.
Yeah, so
I think I might be wrong here because I've only had one cup of coffee, and unfortunately Spencer has disappeared, but I would think that WordPress would be more on the hook for security issues, et cetera, if they take this responsibility on themselves versus the existing condition where it's like, well, you knew you were supposed to update and you didn't update, but this is your website, your responsibility, your problem. You can't blame us for it.
that's a really good point. I would have thought, I just want to confirm this with Walton, I just think other critical software like Microsoft, they just say when they get to a certain level operating system, they say you're no longer going to get security patches. We're not going to tell you not to use it, but we're not supporting it. And you need to upgrade for these reasons because you're no longer, it's not going to be secure.
Mhm.
I would have thought that would have been a better way of doing it. What do you reckon?
That's what WordPress does now.
So I
You
still
have
an
to. You
iPad
have to.
5.0 on it that works just fine.
So-
Apple's breaking all their new stuff with the T2 chip and all the software bullshit. But I have an iPad version 1 with iOS 5.0, and it's been running forever.
But
If
have
they
you
were to
tried
come in and break
installing?
that,
Have you tried installing new apps on it?
well, you
So-
can't. But that's the point. I understand. I accept you can't use the newest or anything, but it's different than them coming in and going, "We're going to break that thing you've had for 20 years." That's
and you know why? So the thing is, this situation would actually never happen for a software company that was a commercial company, because users pay. And when the user pays, you have a legal responsibility to not fuck up their shit. But since no one is paying WordPress has a legal loophole to just be like, we're just going to do whatever, right? The problem, like I said, is that the WordPress precedence for the past, 15, 16, 17 years has been not to do this. So the reasonable expectation from the end user is this does not happen. Changing that policy is something that you can do, but then you would have to do it starting today, saying like from today onward, if you download WordPress, then the expectation is that this might happen. But for anyone who has done this, we're going to grandfather you in, or grandmother you in, or grandparent you in, and say, we're not touching which defeats the entire purpose of this. Because the clear purpose of this is to upgrade everyone to 5.0. This is just a way of like saying, scrap all this old stuff, we're going to 5.0, the end, right? And there are many reasons for that, one of which we will discuss in a little bit. But the security part of this, if the security part of it suddenly is a reason, I want to know what it is that suddenly changed. Because we had this discussion way back when we originally were going to create this auto update for minor releases. This exact conversation happened. The difference is all the people that are arguing for it today were arguing against it last time. Like Andrew Nason was arguing against doing force updates. All the core committers were, and they were using the same arguments against it that people are now using against it, that they're arguing against. So somehow the tables have turned. So all the people that were against it are now for it, and vice versa. And so there is some sort of thing that has changed here. And I'm not sure what that is, but to me, from a moral, philosophical perspective, this is not okay, simply because you are doing something that falls outside of the reasonable expectations of the end user, and you are setting a new precedence without giving people the opportunity to opt out of it in a functional way. Because for them to be able to opt out of it, they have to know that it's happening, and the way that we can notify them doesn't exist for a lot of people.
You've been watching too much Alex Jones. That's what you've been doing.
That is a spectacularly uninformed opinion.
It's a bloody evil plot now. Oh my God, fathers.
Move on.
Let's move along, shall we? Oh, Jesus. After 5 years and $3 million, here's everything we've learned from building Ghost. Right, Sally, what did you like about this article?
Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, Ghost was initially envisioned as a fork of WordPress, as sort of let's get back to the simple blogging tool, because things have become very complicated, and has since become a pretty successful content management system, which, they realized they needed to sort of start over, and et cetera, et cetera. But and I first tagged the story because I know that you like talking about, startups and where people get with their companies and what they do with them. The thing that really struck me reading the article is when they were talking about, so that here are the, it's like, well, we've been successful. We're basically really happy with where we are, but here's what we've learned, which is that decentralized platforms cannot compete on ease of setup, because it's just that they spent a lot of time trying to make something that was super easy to use, as easy to use as things like Squarespace and Medium. Where have we heard this? And they discovered that you cannot do that and still have something that's actually open source and decentralized, and that people can do things with, because you can't be in control of that stuff, and the only way to make it easy is to be in control of it. We spent a very long time trying to compete on convenience and simplicity. This was our biggest mistake and the hardest lesson to learn, because user feedback told us this was what was most important. We deliberately limited flexibility in the product to try to make it more simple, but it still ended up being not simple enough for the average user and not powerful or flexible enough for the professional user, the worst of both worlds. And I think that is something that WordPress really needs to keep in mind in terms of its desire to take on the Squarespaces and Mediums and Shopifys and centralized SaaS products where somebody is in control of everything. And I suspect that this issue is also part of why we keep running into these little problems with Jetpack. So, the Ghost team is committed to open source. And basically what they said is, all right, if trying to simplify things is just going to cripple the product, we're going to stop doing that. We're going to focus on the strength of open source, which is ownership. That you have, that when you have your site set up, it is yours and you are in control and you can build it into anything.
Well, all right. Chris, what did you think of this?
I thought it was a good article. I just want to highlight the area where they talk about how some of the remote team stuff is hard, because a lot of people don't talk about this. They glorify the the year without pants and asynchronous working and all this stuff. But it talks about how it's hard as an employee. You don't know when your people are in a bad mood. There's real loneliness issues. It's hard to build like camaraderie in the team if everybody's just kind of an island. Urgency, like a sense of urgency, is sometimes a problem with team members. And getting to know people outside of work is hard to do online. So I just thought it was nice and refreshing to have that honest critique of the dark side of remote work and being a digital nomad or whatever.
So what do you reckon, Adrian? What do you reckon about this one?
So I actually personally identify with a lot of the points in this as I build my own plugin and technology open source business. The part that I thought was most interesting was when they talked about software as a service wins in simplicity, but open source and self-distributed platforms win in complexity. Now, as I build my own tools, they say that they were trying to make things simplified in order to be able to appease those who are less technologically inclined, and I find myself in the same boat. I'm currently trying to figure out ways in order to simplify as much of the process as possible while still keeping everything open source and still providing a serious amount of flexibility for those who are more power users and more advanced and are aware of what software limitations are and are not. And what I found to be super helpful in that vein is the freemium model. Is the base platform is pretty simple, and most people can get on board with it rather simply. But as soon as they need to advance and they start to become more familiar with how the tools work, and they're more familiar with WordPress and so on, then they can start adding in more advanced features. Part two of that is they went full open source, and they don't necessarily have, at least not that I found in this article, much of a SaaS component. Now, what I've done is I've tried to combine the two. We have a SaaS portion of our business that people can opt into when they install our tools, and that will take them through an almost guided process that takes care of a lot of the nitty-gritty setup stuff for them. at a premium cost, removing a lot of the setup. So we've almost got like a half and half going on. Yes, we offer a simple and open source but flexible product at the same time, paired with a little bit more of the SaaS simplicity and everything in one sort of solution going on there. So that's what I took away from that. It's very much so that if you're running open source or you're doing open source, then flexibility should definitely be probably in the forefront of your mind. If you're going software as a service, then that everything in one certainly wins out.
All right, thanks for that. What did you reckon about it, Morton?
The thing that stood out to me more than anything was the paragraphs he's talking about. Open source development is largely more broken than ever. Where he's saying, you know, he's outlining the same problem that open source has always had, that people use open source products and they expect open source developers to maintain and update that product and add new features as the user wants. So he's saying, you know, everyone thinks that their idea is the most important and that we should work on it right now, and they can't believe that we're not doing it. That's absolutely outrageous. And then they go on Twitter and yell at people and get other people to yell at the lead developers as if that's the best way of getting people to write free code. This is the open source problem of today. It wasn't the open source problem of maybe 15 years ago. The reason is all of a sudden open source has become a money-making machine. So in the past, people were contributing to open source because it was just a thing that was happening and they built what they wanted. But now people are paying for solutions and they actually want features. So there's this conflict between this is just an open source project anyone can contribute, and we're taking money out of this open source project because it's our business. And the reason why people are being like, hey, I need this feature right now, why aren't you building it for me? And then they get really angry, is because they are paying for it. They're not necessarily paying directly to the developers, but they are paying for the solution. And because of that, they see it as a product, not as a free open source service, right? So he's touching on this problem of how we are dealing with open source, both as a commercial enterprise and as an open source community. And those two things they are incompatible to a degree. And he's doing what a lot of open source leaders are doing, which is when they are told by the people who pay in some way for their services or rely on their services that they're not doing their job. He's like, well, you can just write software on your own, right? And it's a valid argument, but it's also an invalid argument. This is a structural problem with open source itself. So that's what I got from it.
I'm not sure that problem is limited to open source because, you know, I think that there are a lot of businesses that have said, hey, okay, so my business runs on this open source thing. So I guess I'm making money from it. I'm willing to like pay for plugins or pay for support or pay for whatever. But there's also, there are a lot of people out there who are on team free shit and are just feel like they're entitled to tell you what to do. And they're not willing to, to pay in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I understand if somebody wants a feature and they don't have this skill to code the feature, that they can't just say, respond to oh, well, if you want it, build it. But yeah, I think there is a lot of confusion about the commercial and non-commercial and who's making money and Ghost is set up as a nonprofit, and I don't think anybody is making millions off it. But there are people making a fair chunk of money from WordPress and from other open source tools, and it's not necessarily a good enough answer to say go ahead and build it yourself. But it's not a good enough response to that to create a mob on Twitter either.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go for our break, folks. We'll be back. Got a couple more stories to discuss when we come back. See you in a few moments. Coming back. Morton's been watching too much InfoWars. Spencer looks like he's going to fall asleep.
Can you even watch InfoWars anymore? They've been deplatformed from everything. Is it like, are you subscribing to VHS tapes or something? Is that how you're...
No, you can go. I think you can still go to their website. I think it's hosted in Ukraine or Russia or somewhere.
All
right.
That's funny.
So
Ukraine or Russia.
Yeah, I think
The annexed part of the Ukraine, which is Russia.
Yeah, I think Uncle Putin still likes Alex. So there we go. So on to, oh God, on to probably true actually. He's probably all right. I'm probably going to get sued now, but fuck it. Jack, on to story 3. Jetpack 7.6 improves AMP compatibility. Adds free through upgrade nudge, blocks only, available on paid plans, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God. What do you reckon about this one, Morton?
Can someone else start this?
Yeah, go on. Right. Let's start with Uncle Spencer. What do you reckon, Spence? Blah, blah, blah.
Well, I think this just sort of goes back to the first story, which is the parents came home from vacation and there was a crack in the egg and Joel's in big trouble, using a risky business metaphor, because this is another example of the paternalism that I see creeping in that is going to lead to Jetpack being forced up the rear end of most people who don't want it, and at a price where the key features will be, of course, paid on the free as in beer platform that also jams the update up your caboose. So just do the math here, and unless I'm being some kind of wild conspiracy theory guy, I see the perfect path towards, you can't be on old versions, we're going to force update you, Gutenberg's jammed up your rear end, oh, all the good stuff in Gutenberg is paid, therefore, in order to keep your site going, Mr. Newbie, Miss Newbie, you really need to subscribe to Automatic. Oh, wow, surprise. Sorry if I'm a little, forthright in my conspiracy theory.
I don't know. That seems to be about how everyone else is.
And just to add something completely unrelated, we talked about episode 47 ago. AMP has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt to be complete and utter bullshit just to serve Google's interests. And anybody who can argue intelligently that AMP serves any benefit to anybody else in the entire open internet other than Google's purpose, I would love to discuss it freely. But otherwise, the fact that they're using AMP compatibility as like the discussion is sort of a double entendre of how we're benefiting you. Like, it's more like how fast we're going to ram something up the rear end, because it's like, who needs AMP compatibility to give away your business in a world where then the site is being forced to do things against your will by the people running the software that's open source? It seems like the opposite of the world you're trying to be in.
Yeah. So, Chris, what Spencer has outlined, if that is the game plan from Automatic and the passive dictator,
I'm not as pessimistic.
I would say that's really unacceptable if that is what the final plan, the destination for this really is. What would you say that I'm correct? It would be unacceptable if this is the plan.
I think so. And I'm not as pessimistic. I don't think Jetpack is going to get bundled into WordPress. I mean, hosting companies do that. They pick some plugins and they bundle stuff in. Service providers do that. But the whole concept of freemium, when done well, I think really works well for everybody. I think WooCommerce does a great job with this. Groundhog does a great job with this. WP Fusion does a great job with this. At Lifter, we strive to give away as much as we possibly can for free. There is an upgrade path to create the sustainability of the business and the project. If there is a nudge, if you have Lifter LMS, we have blocks. We don't have nudges in our blocks, but if you were, I could see, oh, that might be an interesting way. Again, this is where, this is what Automatic is doing. It's like a leadership thing. I'm like, oh, maybe this is kind of the new way to freemium. But this whole model breaks when you give away a unacceptable, unfunctional, free front end that just does nothing but nag and adds no value. Then it's really annoying and it's really distracting and it's not useful. But I think when done well, having blocks that add value that you can then upgrade to having them be even more powerful is not a bad thing.
Well, there's nothing wrong with, paying for blocks with the existence of upgrades. But, the thing that I first saw people talking about on Twitter before looking at this article was precisely that, there seems to be a bit of a double standard applied here, that, they're attempting to keep out other people's nags, but include the ones from Automatic. And, is it like, okay, well, if becomes a precedent, what happens when everybody else does it? And if it doesn't become a precedent, how do you justify it? I have to say, one of the things that struck me the most by reading the story this morning was that the comments all seemed to be very civilized, which is darned unusual on the tavern. But I was also startled at the degree to which the people behind this move were defending it. We had a little bit of backing off not too long ago when something was introduced where everybody was like, whoa, what the, expletive deleted, do you think you're doing here?
I suppose it really depends if you can run a WordPress website without Jetpack. I think the day when they force,
I usually do.
It's just it's not about the plugin. It's about what we're going to talk about in the next story with ad blocking. There's a battle that is always going out in commercial software, which is exemplified by ad blockers, where company says, I want to jam ads on you. Somebody comes up with a thing to block it. Then the ad recipients or the people that are publishing say, well, we'll come up with a blocker and blocker. WordPress right now has this horrible problem that we discuss all the time about the admin area being abused by everybody, including and especially Automatic with Jetpack. And yet Otto's right in there with the club, beating everybody up over their crappy plugins that are spamware. And yet Otto, in a very civilized manner, says, 8 years ago, we defined what fake services are, and ours is never fake, but everything else here is fake, which is just, when you read it objectively, not true. Jetpack is the spammiest of the spammy, and it induces people who have no basic understanding of WordPress to commit to a service for free that gets them all hooked into things that, when they disable them, break the shit out of their site and causes them to double up on things that are otherwise available for free by other authors in the repository or by commercial vendors. And so this whole idea is this: do as I say, not as I do. We're going to force update you. We're going to create this. We'll cause essentially the same thing as ad blockers. Somebody's going to come up with a block updates for WordPress plugin. Then they're going to come up with a block the blocker for WordPress updates. And then we're all going to be left with Microsoft Windows 95 on our WordPress installations. It's going to be horrible.
I think they're being a bit depressive, aren't they, Adrian? Do you think it's because of their age or something?
Get off my line.
There we go, unmuted.
Shut up, old man.
There's
a cloud over there you should be shouting out right now.
I think I go perusing through the comments. I think the biggest gripe just comes down to user experience. And to defend the implementation, it is being tested, so it's not set in stone. And a lot of people were providing useful feedback that, to the credit of the original poster or the original person from Automatic who said this is going to be a new thing, they were right in there saying, hey, listen, we hear your feedback and I'll take this back to the team. So to their credit, they're doing that. The biggest gripe that people had, that at least I read, was that people would be able to select a block that was in the builder, but only upon that being inserted into the content was it revealed that it was a premium block. Now, so that was the biggest gripe that I saw. Now, if they just solved that bit of UX, everybody seemed to be like that. Okay, we would be okay with that, because maybe there's like a little icon with like a $sign on it, or like a little P that says this is a premium block. So people are aware that what they're about to do is check out some sort of premium content. That is something that we do in Groundhog. We have steps that, for example, the SMS step in our own plugin requires our software as a service solution, our sending service, which will broker the WordPress website to an SMS portal or whatever. And we say, hey, listen, this is a premium service. If you want it, go buy it. right? And that's our little like nudge within the funnel builder itself. So I totally understand where they're coming from. And I think that if people want to be able to find that functionality, not everybody knows to go to Google and type stuff in, as obvious as it may seem. In order to be able to stick that, it's like if they have automatic installed, to say, well, you know what, that feature might actually be really useful to me, and I'm willing to sacrifice X amount of dollars in order to have it, just as long as they're aware before clicking on it, inserting it into the content, that it's a premium add-on. And I think that little bit of UX design might help in order to clear things up and make everything seem a little bit more kosher.
Yeah, it's all down to UX design, isn't it? What do you reckon, Walton?
No, it's not.
Oh, no. I thought you were going to say that.
Whose problem are we solving here? Whose problem is this solution solving? Think about it. Automatic is arguing that this problem is that people who already have Jetpack installed need a feature that Jetpack is providing for a fee, but the user is not aware of it, so they go somewhere else to find that feature. That somewhere else could be a free version of something, or it could be a paid plugin from somewhere else. This is not a user problem. This is Automatic's problem, in that they've bundled so much crap into one plugin that people don't know what that plugin provides. They're trying
don't make it very easy to find out either.
They're trying to re-engineer the way WordPress behaves to solve their marketing problem. This has nothing to do with the user. This doesn't benefit the user in any way, unless you argue that being able to be aware of products that you can purchase is beneficial to the user. But the user will know to go looking for blocks, because that functionality already exists. The user will know to go look for plugins. The problem here isn't that those functionalities don't exist. The problem here for Automatic is that they have created a plugin that doesn't make it clear to the user what it can do. So now they're trying to make WordPress do their bidding for them.
Because it does too many darned unrelated things.
Which is the problem. Like when Jetpack was first released, way back in like 1847 or something like that, when one of my friends was working on the team, I was like, this is a Trojan horse. Like, what the fuck is this? How is this allowed? This is very clearly a Trojan horse. This is going to have a crap ton of things that you guys sell. It's going to be inside, you're creating a little marketplace inside a plugin. And you're doing all the things that aren't allowed to do. Like you're bundling features in one plugin. You're making it completely impossible for users to know what's there because you're going to keep updating it. This is just crazy. And they're going, no, it's fine. It's not going to be that. Of course, that's what it is now. And this, again, like this, just like all the other crap that Jetpack has been trying to do lately, because this bookends very nicely with their previous attempts at marketing for features in Jetpack, right? Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
What, 2 months ago, 3 months ago?
It was not long ago. And
they were trying to do the exact
well
same
received.
But it wasn't blocks, it was features in Jetpacks. They were saying if you search for a type of form thing, Jetpack would be like, hey, you don't need to do that. You don't need to go somewhere else. You can get it from us for money and then buy it from us instead. So this is the same thing, just on the block, in the block context. It solves a problem for Automatic. The problem Automatic has is marketing. This is not a solution that solves a problem for the end user. If it was a solution that solved a problem for the end user, they wouldn't approach it like this. They wouldn't approach it like try to shoehorn it in underneath and no one notices and be like, oh, we're just going to fix the UX and then everything will be fine. This is not a UX problem. This is a marketing problem from their end. And to the whole conspiracy theory, Matt Medeiros posted this very interesting thing on Twitter yesterday that said, I'll say it again. In around 3 years' time, visit .org and see free WordPress powered by Jetpack, hosted WordPress one-click setup to affiliated EIG hosts, and the best way to experience WordPress at .com. Displayed in your typical SaaS price grid, and below that in 8-point font, download zip. That's where we're headed right now.
You could be right.
Well, I'm just going to put this to Chris and then move on to probably the final story. I never really understood this fixation that Automatic and obviously the kin obviously has with this freaking Jetpack, because there's loads and loads of other ways of making money from open source. Look at Linux. Yeah, they provide consultation. What do you think, Chris? Because I think this whole fixation, I'm not sure about what Walton and Matt Medeiros and Spencer are outlining, But I've never liked Jetpack, Chris. I thought it was a heap of shit at best. And I thought it's really discrediting Automatic and causing a load of... and I don't think it's that profitable. You know, what do you reckon, Chris? Am I talking nonsense?
So there's a saying in software that free is not a business model, it's a distribution strategy. So I think that's just something to be aware of in the freemium space. And the more, like if in the for-profit SaaS world, that's something you would hear. In WordPress, with a free open source project, it appears like what Matt Medeiros is saying with is like the traditional for-profit SaaS. Yeah, and like the reason it says 8-point font is because we still believe in this, but we're not really trying to put focus on it because this is not our business model. But it still exists and it's here and it's a distribution strategy and we're not trying to hide it or whatever. So that's what that is.
If it's an 8-point font, they're trying to hide it.
Yeah, they're not focusing on it. But there's also this difference where Automatic is a for-profit company, and then there's the WordPress Foundation. So it's just kind of from a leadership and a philosophy standpoint, I think there needs to be more separation between Automatic the business and WordPress the project. A lot of this kind of conflict of interest stuff arises because Automatic, rightfully, because they've had a lot of influence and put a lot into the project, but then pushing a marketing agenda in the product for everybody, it feels really close. So that's where the issue is, which is why Morton's working on the leadership project and just bring more transparency to what's going on, because governance is needed here. How does this nonprofit that is WordPress interact with this for-profit that is Automatic, and it affects everybody. So I think we're sorting through this, but I mean, Automatic's just behaving more and more like a business. Jetpack is their product. It is like a ultimate add-ons for WordPress kind of product. There are other plugins like that out there that, add all kinds of stuff instead of doing one thing. So
yes, let us do everything badly instead of one thing well.
I'd encourage people to, if you really want to get into issue, we were talking about The Year Without Pants, which was written by somebody who worked at Automatic for a while. And there's a whole story in there. I can't recite it because I don't remember it in detail, where they talk about the birth of Jetpack. And I just encourage people who are interested in that topic to check out that book called The Year Without Pants.
Oh, right. But I always thought it was crap.
Year Without Pants? That sounds like crap. Don't have the book, just a whole year without pants. That sounds terrible.
That would be very unpleasant, yes.
It's my freelance career.
If we ignore the conspiracy theories and everything else, consider the precedents set here. This turns the block editor and the block selector into a marketplace.
Yeah.
Like the end result of this is like nightmarish ads everywhere within that box that gives you blocks. Imagine people going like, I'm going to add a paragraph block, and there's like 800 paragraph blocks. Anything. Yeah, it'll be like 800 different paragraph blocks, half of which are full.
No, you know why it won't, Morton? Because they won't let anybody do it except for them. And Otta will make sure to distinguish everybody else's advertising and spamming, but it's okay for Jetpack. That's how the father-mother babysitting will happen, right?
We had a show along.
I enjoyed your Kant quote in the comments. That was
I think we had a show a while ago about this on this WP-Tonic panel about how plugins and themes and now blocks are surfaced in a search. I think that's where the real issue is like, who goes to the top and why, and how does it work? How is it ungameable? I mean, it really should, as a vision and as a goal, be as good as like a Google algorithm or something. It needs to be unbiased. I'm not saying Google algorithm isn't biased, but the search, I think, needs some work. And if somebody has undue influence to float something to the top and for people to not tell what's free and paid, that's where I think the most bang for your buck is for innovation.
Yeah, and the reason why I don't totally agree with you more, Spencer, is not for idealistic reasons that I believe in Matt the Prince. It's just for practical reasons. I just cannot believe that he's going to be prepared to piss off all the developer community, all the sub-plugin community, all of it. Throw it out with the baby, you know, piss off Chris here, piss off Adrian here, piss off literally all the third-party developer community, which has built WordPress to what it is. I just don't believe he would be dumb enough to do that.
But this doesn't piss off the plugin developer because they're all seeing cash come in from this.
Well, right. I mean, I think the plugin developers are saying, all right, if you can do that, I can do that.
This just opens, that's what I said, this opens a new marketplace for plugin developers. And they're all like, look at Adrian's face right now. He's like, money, right? It's and Chris is like, I'm leaving. I'm not.
I got a wasp in my
He's buying his yacht right now.
Sure, a wasp in my office. Yeah. The precedence here is not great. It goes against what the user needs. It also sets an unreasonable expectation for everyone involved. It's just a bad idea.
I don't understand why. I mean, I know why, but it is an objective question, like rhetorical. Why does Automatic have to induce their own business stuff into the open source? Why don't they just stick with what they've got, which is, here is our service that is our best improved version of us setting up WordPress for you, like WordPress.com, that has all of our jammed up your wazoo kind of options, and leave the other thing the way that most people want it, which is not having ads in the block editor, not having this and that. Because I don't understand, like, the hypocrisy is so seemingly patently obvious that why just not stay in their lane? And then the people who need that will take that. I mean,
because Jetpack is auto-installed in so many hosting services. Like Jetpack is almost like a Kismet now, where it's like you install WordPress, you get Jetpack with it. This is
Why is that?
This is why
I know good question.
How we got here. I'm saying if we were gonna induce a like do-over, I'm saying let's accept Jetpack is a Trojan horse. We all agree on that, and say from this day forward, any hosting companies have to offer people out of the box not the WordPress paid version with all the crap in it, but instead the neutered, you know, generic version that it always was. And if somebody wants to pay the money, great, pay the money, get the fully jammed with junk version, and then go live with WordPress. But for the rest of us, the solution seems so simple. It's just keep open source with the rules that are fair for everybody, and have WordPress.com be the thing that ends up in all their partners like GoDaddy and HostGator and Bluehost. Jam that stuff up the newbies' rear ends. And I just don't see why this is such a bad solution, because like that's where it's going to end up anyway, because if they force it too far, it's going to be the software to block that from happening, or a fork. What else is the logical conclusion?
Radio it's going to be our last story, actually, because we've got on their recommendations. Adblocking now, about now. Naff? I don't know.
How about
Nah. So, Spencer, what did you like about this story?
Well, I mean, this is the same point, but in the ad blocker space, which is the war of attrition of, right? Like, I do this every day, and I find this, like, hilarious. Being in the early days of the internet, we went through Flash, and then we went through, you know, like, Excite and Yahoo, and, you know, pop-up. And even though Lim's Cars is still around for a laugh, most of us have breathed a deep sigh of relief that when we go to websites, there aren't pop-ups. But what has taken its place is this ridiculous proposition that Chrome has integrated essentially advertisement so deep into it that a marketplace existed for putting ad blockers in. Well, that has caused like a political turmoil where now there's like, well, where's the motive lie? Because these are all bundled together in a tight thing. Well, certain laws and regulations were created that prevented nefarious behavior, but now that those things are bundled, that might put them at certain liabilities. So without getting long-winded, the battle is between the consumer protection laws that prevent people from getting stuff forced upon them anymore, and the fact that the browsers have all these things built into their model for advertisers, And so people are left with these ridiculous propositions as of this morning, where now I get pop-ups that say, so sorry, you're not privileged enough to look at our stupid article for free. So therefore you have to either turn off your ad blocker or say bye-bye. And most of the time I say, fuck you and the horse you rode in on. And I just search the title in Google, and guess where it shows up for free? In Google AMP mobile version. So I just read the article for free anyways. Double fuck you.
There,
Google.
you found a use for AMP.
I'm just saying, it's like the whole thing is so insane.
Use for AMP, didn't you?
2019, and I'm getting asked to give $1 to read something from a hometown newspaper that then forces me to see a pop-up and then go search for the thing just to say F you and read it on Google AMP. Like, can we just avoid this and just get to a different model? I mean, that's it.
Well, it's very annoying. I mean, I've been to websites where they basically said, "Oh, you have an ad blocker on. We're not going to, we're not going to let you read this." And it's like, hey, if you would put ads on your site in such a way as to like not make it unreadable, I would be willing to look at your ads. But the way you put ads on your site makes it impossible to read the text.
Ridiculous.
So
how about video? How about videos like the 30-second video that has a 30 second to 1 minute ad? I mean, it's like, did anybody think about this? It's like same on Roku. I love Roku, but if you watch Roku, you get these things like if you want to watch an ABC TV show that just aired the evening before, not exaggerating, 6 to 8 20 to 30-second commercials every 4 minutes. I mean, there must be 14 to 20. It's unwatchable. And I think, like, is there an executive somewhere that has watched this themselves and decided this is good for business? Because, like, we've reached the point of ridiculousness, not that dissimilar, by the way, in my opinion, to what happened with Excite banners and Yahoo and everything else. It just became Las Vegas.
Well, what do you reckon, Morton? I just think it's a sign of a broken business model. And, basically that's what it is, really.
Sign of broken business model? Yes. We've yet to figure out how to monetize the web in a responsible way. Advertising clearly doesn't work.
Well, we have. It's called Spine.
Well, that's only accessible to people with large footprints. But there was a story yesterday about how Facebook is trying to entice publishers to publish more content on Facebook exclusively. Like, newspapers only publishing their content on Facebook and not on their own sites. So there's, and who pays for that? Well, you pay for it with your data and the psyops you get exposed to. So it's a fundamental problem of the internet that we've tried to turn the internet into money and turn users just surfing the internet into money. I don't know what the solution is going to be here. Paywalls are an extremely cumbersome issue, especially when you get to paywalls that exist in other countries, because you'd have to like set up accounts in other countries under other jurisdictions, and sometimes they don't take payments from credit cards you own and stuff like that. Like I was in Germany and I couldn't pay for transit with my phone because the app wouldn't allow any non-European credit cards. So I had to pay cash for transit because I didn't have a non-European credit card. So there's a bunch of weird things like that. The other part of this is no one is innovating in this space at all. Everyone is going, there's either advertising paywalls or crypto mining. But the crypto mining thing is hopefully going to die because it's terrible. So that leaves us with two terrible options. And no one is thinking, maybe we should stop earning money like this at all. Like maybe we should figure out some other method. The only other thing I've seen that has any legs to it is what Brave is doing, where they're saying that you accrue points by just using the browser, and then you can pay those points back to the owners. But the problem is that requires Brave to be as big as Chrome, right? Otherwise, there's no value in it. Mm-hmm. So, you have ads on your podcast. I skip every ad on every podcast. So
I hope you don't skip mine.
It's of course I do. There's going to be ad blockers for podcasts. There's this notion that we can cram marketing information in the face of people so that they get access to things is just stupid. It doesn't work. We need to find new ways of monetizing it. And I think it relies on how to, you're like falling off your chair. I think what we need to do is figure out where is the actual value and how do we turn that value into money and pay the people who deserve to be paid, right?
Right, fair enough. On to our recommendations, and I've got a recommendation, and it's a YouTube. It's on YouTube. It's 2 hours long though, but you can skip bits, and it's called Domination. What's it about? It's, over the past 2 years, I've become virtually a non-eat meter because I found out the truth of industrial farming and the misery and the filth that these animals live in. And the idea that you would feed any of this meat to yourself and to your children is mind-blowing because of the cruelty and the disease and the suffering that all these animals go through. And this is not easy. I would ask all my listeners and viewers to go and watch this. It's not going to be an easy watch, but after you've watched it, you will then understand what industrial farming, when it's about livestock in America and Australia, is really about, which is just total suffering and diseased product, which then they have the audacity to try and sell to you and your children and basically poison you. So go and watch it and wake up. So, so Morten, have you got something you want to share with the listeners and viewers? He's gone silent.
Yeah. So there's this thing called meat. You should eat it. While I think that you have a point, I would like to point out that generally speaking, the documentaries that exist anywhere that are about the mishandling of animals very specifically talk about the mishandling of animals in the United States.
No, this is Australia.
And Australia.
There's Zealand, and Canada.
Yeah, so there's a reason why countries like Canada, for instance, have very strict regulations on what types of meats can be imported from the United States. And this is part of the reason for that. That's not to say that meat production is not terrible.
And dairy.
That's also not to say that there aren't farmers who actually do this in a responsible and ethical way.
Well, they're trying, but they're
is growing. The larger problem here is, like everything else, that we are overproducing food to give to rich people and not to poor people and all that stuff. The just stop eating meat thing is not a structured and functional solution to a larger problem, because rich people stopping eating meat and going to Whole Foods and buying, $10 asparagus instead doesn't solve the problem, because poor people are still forced to eat garbage food because that's the only thing they can afford. A better solution would be to change our society in such a way that healthy food is the cheaper option. Right now, healthy food is the most expensive option. Yeah. So we can all stand on our high horse.
What is your recommendation? We need to hit the show, Morten.
Yes, but I'm just astonished it's taken Jonathan this long to learn what factory farming is actually about.
That's totally unfair.
I have no tip.
I've known for over 5 years, longer than that, the reality of industrial corporate farming is. But I'm just saying to the viewers, if you go and watch this, the truth is really just put in front of you, the reality. You can't just dismiss it and just walk away. This film really puts it smack into your consciousness, the shit that they're trying to sell you. So, Spencer, what have you got a recommendation to the listeners and viewers?
Totally killed my whole keto thing just with this whole conversation. But aside from that, I'm going to recommend Tom McFarlane, along with JJJ or Triple J, and a few others, is one of my favorite WordPress developers because he's been around a long time, and he, without a lot of politics and yelling about it, makes really clever solutions. So this one is turn off all admin notices. It's free on GitHub. It installs like a plugin, and essentially it doesn't do stuff to hide or remove stuff in a fancy way. It just simply is probably a CSS JavaScript trigger that essentially, with an admin top button, turns off all of that stuff we were just talking about, like, well, update the Jetpack and do this, and you haven't done your license, and it's like with one elegant button, it just simply hides that whole block. Call it a day. Because on a little techie note, I just want to say, for anybody who's ever tried to turn this stuff off for their clients independently, nobody is abiding by the standards in the WordPress core that say you're supposed to have a dismissible button, or that you dismiss it once and it goes away. And even when you look at the class IDs and selectors, like there is nothing in there that you can particularly select on any plugin that says shut the F up by way of CSS. They all are very clever that they just produce it automatically with JavaScript. So what this does is it just says, shut the garage door on the whole mess and be done. So if anybody's struggling, this is one of the more clever solutions for it, because you push it again, it opens up the whole, and you just close it until you're done with it.
I'll put it into chat. Make sure it's in chat with you. So I'll make sure. So Chris, have you got anything to share with the listeners and viewers?
I do. I made a mistake of buying a $8 pair of earbuds at the pharmacy or whatever, and they lasted for about a week. So I got my second set of symphonized earbuds. They're actually made out of wood. They're about $30. I really like these things.
I've almost never found a pair of in-ear earbuds that actually fit in my ears.
They have 3 different sizes. I actually like them so much. I got the these two.
I'll make sure it's in the chat with you. So link, can you? So Sally, have you got anything you want to recommend to this?
I do. I have it is a free plugin called Shortcodes Finder. If you have inherited a website that was built out of things that use shortcodes, and you need to know like every place you're going to have to fix stuff before you can turn it into something usable, this is very useful. Or if you just want to know, I mean, I initially installed it because I just wanted to be sure like where all the gravity forms had been inserted. And so whether you're planning to get rid of the shortcodes or you just need to know where they are, it's very handy.
All right, and it works.
Yes.
Oh, great! I saw that you put it into Slack. If you can put the link into chat, it would be much appreciated.
That.
Oh, thank you, Adrian. Got anything you want to recommend to the listeners and viewers?
I'm going to recommend Jetpack. No, I'm just kidding. We listed Groundhog on Product Hunt yesterday.
Oh, come on, you can't push your own plug.
I'm not going to push my own plugin, but we listed on Product Hunt yesterday. Yeah. And ever since listing on Product Hunt, our traffic has literally been through the roof, and now we have 135 recommendations on that platform. So if you have a software as a service or a plugin or something, and you're not experiencing a significant amount of growth very fast, then you can go list yourselves on Product Hunt, and that may be able to help you get a little nice boost of traffic for a little bit, get a couple recommendations, get a couple downloads. It's certainly been helpful for us in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, that's great. Like I say, remember, listeners and viewers, don't buy that industrial meat. So, well, thank you, panel. It's been a fascinating discussion. I'm sure I'm going to get some comments about this one. And we'll be back next week with another well, the panel's going to be interesting. My stories and me isn't that interesting. But the panel's quite amusing. So we'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
Bye.